everybody, and welcome to the session on biodiversity measurement and ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria. I think our topic is actually slightly broader than just the title. My name is Petri Lehtonen, and currently I'm working for the Forests for the Future facility. We are advising European Commission on future forest interventions. And the reason probably why I'm here is that my task is especially to look how we could leverage finance, especially private finance, private investments to forestry and sustainable forestry and forest-based value chains in a broad way. I mean, in a broad landscape. And this is extremely interesting for me. So I have been in this business well, a bit over 30 years, different roles globally, and we all know that more private investments are needed to nature-based solutions or natural climate solutions. It's more or less the same thing, and in these, forestry has a major role. Probably the kind of challenge is that the kind of traditional, conventional forestry timberland investments are not necessarily always nature-based solutions. And this is something that why we need ESG criteria to convince, to prove that the investments are really leading, having the desired impacts. So together with me, we have here Angelica de la Cruz and Carmine de Franco. Both are very experienced professionals with vast track on financing nature-based solutions, and we are discussing this topic. So first, I will ask my colleagues now to introduce themselves. So first, Angelica, can you tell me why you are here? Please, Angelica.
Thank you, Petri. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be talking and sharing my knowledge with everybody. Again, I've been here before. And I would say as a pioneer, and what I mean with that is really for 20 years ago, we were working with sustainability indicators and sustainability field already for large corporates like ABB in the Aspects time. So today we talk a lot about the ESG, but this is an old thing. And then 2015, the SDGs, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals came along and it made a common language with everybody. So today I'm here in the sense of Innorbis, which is a company that we drive and we founded for more than 5 years ago now. And Innorbis is key for measurement, handling over 500 indicators and measures you're going to hear are not indicators, and the ESG field that in the capital markets, we do talk a lot about what the unknown is compared to what the financials are. So I'm here sharing with you today my experience, my pioneering in measurements, and the projects, both private and public projects that we have driven for a couple of years now. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica. So Carmine, why are you here? Please.
Well, I'm here to learn, to be honest. I'm the head of research of an asset manager that works within the biodiversity space. So we invest in companies based on the biodiversity metrics, footprint, and we need to learn how to do it better. So I'm here to learn.
So Angelica, can you tell about the latest developments of ESGs, or maybe you want to say key performance indicators, especially in corporate world, and how it has been applied in nature-based investments?
Thank you for that question, Petri. That's a good one. And I'm going to be forward-looking as usual. I'm not going to be what current is, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the challenges today. And to be honest, and I'm going to be very bold today, the carbon emissions were supposed to handle a lot of impact and to solve the integration of the financials with the sustainability field. And unfortunately, I see a lot of distraction because remember, carbon emissions, scope 1, 2, 3, and the 3 are not even, there is not a lot of data out there or none. They are just indicators, okay? And carbon is in everything. Okay, so there are no variables there that we can talk about to differentiate and to give incentives to corporates, such as the large corporates. Okay, so what about moving on, if we are talking about natural resources, and if we talk about what we really want to restore, and then we need to shift, and I would say to start talking about the carbon sequestration and how we do that, how we actually turn on the air refrigerator of Earth. That is to do with soil quality. That is to do with the water molecules in the air. Come on, you know, carbon is carbon. That's just the emission. I would suggest that for the economic people here, the financial people listening to this, it's more or less like saying you are going to look at your bottom line results by a cost line. No, you cannot do that. You need to look into both sides. There are two sides of the coin. And I would say the quality of the water, we call it the green water because we work with brilliant minds that work for cool water projects, and that is so important. What you have in the forest today and the agriculture is so much important than just what I call it distracting with tracking carbon emissions scope 1 and 2. I would say the vision forward is really getting to the measures, really understanding what's important to make these people heroes instead of just reporting or communicating that they are tracking now the transparency, which is very important. Don't get me wrong, it's very important, of the carbon emissions. So and to be really clear, it's not that I'm a climate denier, it's just that by taxing by ratings of carbon emissions is not going to save our planet and our forest and our agriculture. And not even the biodiversity, if I will go there. But perhaps I will stay here and get some questions.
Okay, thank you. So, Carmine, your term, we all know that investments require returns, and sometimes investments in nature, even we have very kind of, let's say, fascinating models and systems. It's sometimes quite hard to understand how we can really get the returns. So could you tell what is the link between the ESG benefits and markets?
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to see this is, let's assume I am a pension fund. Okay, so I have two duties. The first one is I need to pay my people a pension that will allow them to live in 30 years time. And this is pretty tough given the low rates environment. But second, and more importantly, I need to make sure that they can spend their pension in a livable world, which means not the world with 4 degrees plus compared to the baseline scenario. So nowadays I have these two constraints on my investment policies. I need to produce returns to somewhere. This is the world where we live, but I also need to pay attention to what kind of risks could affect my investment decision and where are my opportunities. So instead of looking at nature-based solutions as a way to provide, and I agree with Angelica, a nice story to tell or nice things to report, I personally look at where my next opportunities will arise. For example, I work a lot in the agriculture, in the food space, which with respect to the biodiversity is the biggest issue. So here you can see, well, this is the sector with the easiest impact on biodiversity. So you need to measure it. So you need those kind of metrics to drive your capital allocation. But the same metrics can tell you where the opportunities are. Let me give an example. It might be a little bit theoretic, but if you have two companies and one is investing massively in plant-based protein, alternative meat, or is managing in a most sustainable way their forests so they can sell carbon credit, this is not only have an impact that I can measure with these ESG metrics. This is also good and important for my investment decision, and it's easier to convince other institutional investors, other pension funds, even retail investors that this is the way to go. So in a nutshell, I'm not advocating that natural-based solution need to be linked to positive financial returns, but as the other panelists before us said, is a nice incentive. And the more we can prove that these two are linked, and they actually are, the more we can mobilize private capital. This is what we need today if we want to tackle those issues.
Thank you. So maybe just, Carmine, here is an additional quick question. What kind of biodiversity measure are you using?
We are using a few of them. As Angelica said, it is very difficult to find a unique metric that captures everything. So you need to look a little bit at all the fields that actually impact biodiversity. In the case of the agriculture and food sector, we are using a physical metric that is called the MSA, mean species abundance. Is a metric that actually compares the state of biodiversity after, let's say, a human action has been done and before, so compared to the undisturbed state of the biodiversity. So you capture the difference. Let me give an example. What is the impact of producing 1 liter of milk? What is the impact of producing 1 kilogram of beef? So this is the physical metrics. And we combine these metrics with policies and procedure related to deforestation, because it's the most visible issues. And to be honest and transparent, it is also the kind of indicators that as of today that are easily available to investors, because most of the time these are disclosed in financial or annual reports, or companies that are doing good on these topics, they tend to report. It's not enough, we need more. The point is, biodiversity is really complicated matter. Just let me conclude here. If you produce tons of CO2, whether you do it in China, in Africa, in France, or in Brazil, it's still the same tons of CO2. But a kilogram of beef is not the same whether you produce it in China or in Brazil. So it's a much more complex data. Therefore, we need much more data that's coming from the companies that actually work in these fields.
Thank you. So Angelica, let us think a little bit the corporate world. You have lots of experience. So what is your experience? Are the corporates considering ESGs, especially biodiversity, in their core business strategies?
Thanks for that question, Petri, because I have to be frank again, I haven't seen a lot of the companies doing that. I have seen a lot of communication and reporting, but no, in the sense that I measure that, okay? So let's talk about how could they do? Okay, the number one is that sustainability specialist needs to talk to the economy and financial and treasury department. That's where the budget and the programs comes from. So the silos, and it's something that we've seen for years now when we run these projects with corporates and the public sector, they need to own the mission of restoring, and that's a goal. And then we can find the indicators and measure them to see if something has happened. So I'm talking about some of the corporates, and I hope all of them listening here that are in trouble, what should we do? To reinvent themselves. They are not offenders if they can be the heroes, if they are, let me give some examples. If they own land, if they own a forest or a waterbed, and there are poisoning stuff in there. There are things that needs to be cleaned up. There are waste, or there are restoration of forest and the soil that needs to be done. These products, they could be running that. They have the technology, they have the money, they have the investments, and the other side of the coin, if they are just stuck saying we are going to become net zero in 2050, just tracking carbon emissions, it's not going to happen. Then we have the same condition as for 100 years ago when horses went to cars. And I would say horses still exist, but in a different sense. So that's what I mean with reinventing themselves. So to be very frank, coal, fossil oil, and these things will exist, and they are needed at the moment to drive, you know, the economy that we have today. But they need to reinvent themselves so they can be the heroes and the winners in the future. And that is by changing the business model. Let me give you one more thing. if you still track, let's talk about KPIs. In a corporate, you track KPIs by the sales figures, that's not going to go anywhere. Think more circular, think about the function and what is actually happening within your business that you can really restore to the point that you create a completely different scenario for your own company, giving returns and profits and the opportunities. So carbon sequestration, I would say, is key. And there are other ways, there are ways of doing that through forest, through biodiversity, and with the measurements that corporates needs to be looking at. Now, from the investment side, let me also give a risk warning here. That's my core from my previous positions in the banking world, the investment banking world. The syndicated loans we have in the banks today, because of the new taxonomy that came on board already this year, and it will be more to come, they will drive the differentiation, not only in pricing, but what do we have as an appetite to invest on or to facilitate a credit on. I'm talking about syndicated loans and funds like Carmine was mentioning. You know, this is so important because it might be that the cost of driving the current business models are so high in a couple of years to come that it's irreversible. And then the business die, right? And we've seen that before. So the energy is getting cheaper and business programs needs to be there. And you need to attach that, not only, let me give you another one, issuing green bonds and not doing the programs that are necessary to drive the purpose. That's very, very important. So I'm calling on all the corporates here and the sustainability people to really talk to the budget and economic and financial and treasury departments and not work with silos. Don't not work with a silo indicator as carbon just reporting on. Please don't do that. That will not lead to anything and any profit opportunity.
Okay, thanks. Carmine, what is your view on, let's say, corporate governance and ESGs?
I agree with Angelica in the sense that, you know, there is no need to have an head of ESG. I might have no many friends today in the audience like head of ESG separate. I think the head of ESG of a company is the CEO itself. He needs to take care of the long-term strategic objectives of the company, understand where the risks, where the market is going. So ESG will have to become integrated part of the business plan. So I really appreciate, for example, when it is the CEO of the company that take a stance on social issues or takes a stance of environmental targets. I'm not saying that it's an easy job to do, because most of the time these are pretty technical and complex things. We are getting used to have CEOs that are experts in fundings, that are experts in marketing, that are maybe so creative that, you know, can see a world 20 years from now. But, you know, we might need to be back to the CEOs that is a little bit more like an engineer that understands the dynamics behind climate, the dynamics behind biodiversity, but it has to be part of the strategy of the business. Let me give an example, Petri. Maybe you can help understand. If you are running, let's say, a business of restaurants, let's say you are a global chain of restaurants, whether you sell plant-based burgers or meat-based burgers, this is a decision that has a huge impact on biodiversity. It has also a huge impact on business, and it must come from the senior management. You know, in a silo, it would never get a large corporate to move and reinvent themselves, as Angelica said. So I think that those issues need to be upgraded. Some of the corporates are already there. We have been knowing CEOs that are very visible on the ESG issues, but, you know, we need to be a little bit more, it has to be the normal, let's say. We're seeing some of this in Europe. We are starting to see in the US. We need to be on the same level across the board.
Well, I was thinking when you answered that actually same, I think the same applies to the governments. And sometimes I can feel that some corporates have been really forerunners in this field. Let's see, there are a couple of questions from the audience, and maybe we can quickly look, and if not, we can later on, we are available. So there is a question, is that maybe this is to Carmine, that can we measure increased crop harvest returns with improved biodiversity, soil, water. And then we have also, maybe you can, Carmine, can you answer that?
Yeah, I will be very, very quick. Let me be fully transparent and honest. I am aware of research that shows the relationship between yields in agricultural production and the current status of biodiversity. From my perspective, I typically invest in listed equities, which tend not to be in the upstream, so the direct supplier of agricultural products. So I wouldn't know if this is feasible given the existence of the data today. These are private companies, so they are not required to disclose a bunch of data that is needed. In theory, it is possible if the regulation requires them to disclose more by crossing, for example, where the production is taking place, what kind of systems are they using, and what kind of crops they are growing. It's possible to use theoretical research. As a matter of fact, as we invest more in the downstream, so the big players that then control the supply chain, we are not able to do that at the moment.
Thank you. So I just, there's, I think, an interesting comment or question from the audience is that should we not be moving beyond ESG risk mitigation towards measurement of positive impact contributions? I personally have been thinking about that, and I fully agree. Actually, it's a question like we used to have that, okay, we have an investment and we will do the least harm. But I think that the criteria should be really the positive impact, how we can do more good. I don't know if Angelica, you want to react on that. You look like that. So before we move to the next questions.
It's really good. Yes, ESG, I would say, has been captured today by very large players that are doing, black box ratings and putting the capital flow in the wrong direction. I fully agree. We need to be thinking of the purpose, of the impact. And unfortunately, ESG means environment, social, and governance, but it became something else. So maybe we have to change our narrative and our language here, right? So fully agree. I would also suggest that make the big difference between what an indicator is and what a measure is. And an indicator is a carbon, by tons. An indicator could be water, could be waste by tons. But a measurement is defined by your goals. And there are correlations that you need to encounter into that measure that can combine more than 100 indicators. For example, the biodiversity, if I can add to Carmine's answer, it could be seen by how much water do you have, in an area, in the air, because if you don't have a lot of that, the conditions for living things are not there, you see? So there are so many correlations that you cannot work with one silo indicator, because then you don't see the full picture. And then you don't restore what you need to restore. So just about measurements, about ESG, and then perhaps to end with the government part, because the big G is the most important one. When you have the mandate, and Carmine was on that one, the CEO, the mandate of the steering committee, that's the important fact. Otherwise, any department within a corporate or within a public city, we've worked a lot with them at the moment, they don't know what to do. They cannot do. So the mandate needs to come, and the mandate is for the purpose, not for an indicator or reporting. So let's be clear on that.
Angelica, maybe a little bit related to that, I would like to ask you, can ESG criteria now, when applied to this nature-based invest, really contribute to climate change mitigation adaptation? Is that the kind of big solution?
Thanks for that, Petri. Okay, let's then lift the discussion and talk about the big G, the governance. Okay, let's leave a little bit of the social aspects that are very important, the farmers that needs to get the incentives and the ability to work on, for example, regenerative agriculture. Okay, if we take the ownership and the big G, if we take that water beds and soil and land such as the Amazon or the savannas, the Mata Atlantica, if you think about that, who owns that, who has the responsibility? It could be corporates, it could be governments, it could be cities, it could be municipalities. So those owners need to think about, are they okay? Are they with good quality? Do we have to clean it up? And I would say, based in Sweden, we have problems from the North Pole to the South Pole, everywhere, because of the ownership and who does what and who finances what. And I think if we can solve that question, yes, then the answer is yes. Let's solve the ownership, the responsibility that comes with that, the accountability for the citizens, for our earth, and to be, you know, really at the good quality so we can solve climate change.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask Carmine, how should we actually measure biodiversity so that it's meaningful? And related to this, we have also a very good comment from the audience, from Shailendra Mirska, and she asked, when we talk about biodiversity, we talk about above ground biota, flora and fauna. However, the concern should be also on below ground biodiversity. So Carmine, please.
Yeah, this is a great question, Petri, and also great remark from the audience. It's true. Yeah, it's true. You need to, you know, you can't just concentrate on flora and fauna. It's more than that. Biodiversity is a complex thing. The approach we've been taking so far, and this is specific for the agriculture and food sector. I believe that for other sectors you might need to adapt given the circumstances. But in the agriculture and food sector, we are been using obviously up, let's say, above the ground, so changing land use and carbon emissions as two pillars. And if you can partially answer the question from below the grounds, we use NOx emissions and everything that is related to fertilizer, because this has an impact on biodiversity when you ruin the underground, and ecotoxicity of fresh water, which is also related to the source of water that you have underground. It's not perfect. For example, there is a missing piece with the oceans, but we will get there. And just let me conclude here, Petri, that for us, and I believe that everybody shares with me, it's really important that we measure it with physical metrics, not procedure, not reporting stuff, physical measure. We need to understand how much does it take this product compared to that product, and then make choice, even in terms of CapEx from corporates.
Yeah, we have still, I think, a couple of minutes time, and now I would like to ask a kind of final comment from Angelica. Mm-hmm. I was think about whether we need regulations or voluntary measures, but whatever is your final comment, Angelica, please.
Thank you. Regulation is good for the fair play. We need to compare players. We need to have a stage where everybody can freely act, okay? But regulation do not drive. Regulation is always, coming after. And I would say, let's lift the entrepreneurs, let's lift the ones that really are driving and accelerating for contributing to the impact in both the environmental, in the social, and in the governance aspect, because we do need to do so much that, we cannot wait for regulation. I mean, there is ecocide, there is a lot of things that are happening, the taxonomy for, the financial sector, and the corporates are answering to that, but that is not enough. So the ownership and the really purpose, meaningful, willing to change and to make the impact, that's what we work with. And that's what we work with, the facts, unbiased, raw data in the metric system that we run is a common metric systems. It's beautiful.
Okay, Carmine, your turn now.
I agree with Angelica. Regulation will come too late. We need to move. We need to move faster and leverage the entrepreneurial spirits of all the people that are listening to us.
So I guess this means that I can maybe, if I have time to summarize, I guess ESGs are needed. We need to measure them so that it's very concrete, and then also that when we think about that, it's not the kind of minimum criteria. We have to kind of see that actually when we are investing, we are really getting the kind of meaningful impacts. I think that there were some additional questions from the audience, but I believe that we are just about coming to an end, if I have been taking the time correctly. So we just have to finalize now. So I want to thank you, the audience, and please let us continue the next. I think that next session is going to more details on ESG topics. So I hope that we can continue this discussion in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.